Certain by your answers, conquerors, we're here this afternoon to give glory to God for the greatest dad, the greatest uncle, greatest business partners, greatest friend, greatest individual that I know. Give glory to God for him. And to praise Jesus that he's really at home today. The Bible declares to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And so, on October 22nd, 2019, heaven changed. Because the entrance of Art Denny. Whenever he entered a room, the atmosphere changed. And now that he's gone, the atmosphere has changed. I want to thank you for being here today. These are not easy days. But we have the confidence in knowing that because of what Jesus did on the cross, this is not the end. He died on the cross for our sins. And the Bible declares on the third day he rose from the dead, conquering death, hell, and the grave. It was several years ago in a very similar setting that I was really afraid that I wasn't going to be able to make it. My dad shared with me that there is a power, that's what he would talk about, power. If you got close to him, he would let you know who that power was. It's Jesus. There's a power, and he would tell me, he said, there's a power, if I will let that power hold me, that I can make it. And I pray that the Holy Spirit will be here and that we will make it. I want to read his favorite scripture. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. Scripture does not promise that we will not have hard times. It does not promise that days will not be difficult. But it does give us the hope of knowing that we can overcome. Again, thank you for being here today. We have several that are taking part in the service. And I'm very grateful to each one. And I wish that I had, and we had the time for me to ask every relative and every friend to say something. Because that's just how important you are to our family. I wish I had time to gather all the photos and scan all the photos. But time just would not stand still. I told my wife, Teresa, I just want to hit the pause button so I can have more time. But that's just the way life is, isn't it? We only have but so much time. And so I apologize for not having everybody's picture in the video tribute. Most of it, I don't even have pictures of you, but you're in my heart, and you're in Dad's heart. And thank you for being here today. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Through any dangerous toils and snares, I already gone. 'Twas grace that bought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, right shining as the sun, we know less babies to sing God's praise, and when we first begun. Praise God, 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 praise God.
everybody. I'm Rodney Hunt. Those that will, please help me pray together the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I met Art a long time ago, and well, frankly, let me put it this way. You're looking at a miracle. I'd be dead if that man hadn't took care of me. I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And there was a day I was ready for help, and there was a policeman in Beaufort. I'm from Beaufort. And I was parked beside the bridge there, trying to figure out what to do next. And this was a Monday morning. He says, well, there's a man over there at News Mental Health. He says, I think can help you. He said, his name is Charlie Sharp. He says, why don't you go on over there and talk to him? I said, okay. So I did. I'd known Charlie 5 minutes, and he got on the telephone and he called Art. He says, Art, I got a live one down here. He says, I need some help. Well, less than 15 minutes, Art was there. I'd never seen the man before in my life. And he stuck out his hand, introduced himself. He looked at Charlie, and he said, that don't look like no drunk to me. And Charlie kind of shook his head. He said, well, I ain't known him too long either, but he's convinced me he's a drunk. I said, all right. I mean, they're talking about me. You know, I never heard such talk as all this. Every third word was, yeah, he's a drunk. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, I said, you know, what little experience I've had around Alcoholics Anonymous, they call these folks alcoholics. You know, they have a little dignity about them. And Charlie went off somewhere and left me there with Art, and we were talking, and we were alone. He says, so you want to get sober? I said, yeah, I believe I do. I said, I've about ruined everything in my life. And Art said, well, he says, do you think you can go the rest of this day and not take a drink and meet me? He named the church and everything about 5:30. I said, yes, sir. I believe I can do that. And he says, all right. Well, by some miracle, I did. I didn't take a drink for the rest of that day. And all I was focused on was being able to get to that church that night. Well, when I got there, Art was standing there waiting for me. And it really wasn't the first AA meeting I'd ever been to, but it was the first AA meeting that I went to that I really did want to get sober. And I sat through that first meeting, and it was a speaker meeting, and I can't recall who was speaking. I can't remember who was in the room. Art gave me a phone number. He says, now, decide you want to take a drink, let her call me. Well, the only thing I was thinking was, well, is he going to drink with me or what? I didn't know how all that worked. But somehow I made it through that night, and I called him the next morning like he asked me to, and he says, are you working today? I said, no, I don't think so. And he come got me. don't remember where we went, what we did. I just remember being with him. And at this time, I was truly amazed. We had some lunch, and he carried me to another meeting that night. Same thing repeated. He called me the next morning. I think we did eat something that day, I can't remember, but he introduced me to another man named Tom Davis. Some of y'all in here know who I'm talking about. Well, he scared the pure hell out of me. I said, Lord, have mercy. He says, I want you to be to that meeting. And he talked real rough. I want you to be at that meeting tonight. I said, yes, sir, I'll be there. Sure enough, I went there, and you know, there was about 60 people in that room. And the only thing I could really think about, I said, dang, you know half these folks in here are lying. They've been drinking. But they hadn't. Now, I was really kind of new to this. This was 37 years ago. I hadn't had a drink since then, or drug or anything like that. In less than a week, I think I ate lunch or supper with Art about 5 or 6 times. And got along with him pretty good. And it was really something that he transferred to me in less than a week that stuck with me. And it was real simple. He says, this not drinking stuff is pretty easy if you can do it one day at a time. All I could think was, well, if you can't, you know, you guys need to be here if you can't do that. You know, I must not be like the rest of y'all. Yeah, I can drink for not one day, for God's sakes. Well, I found out that it was a little harder than that, and that I needed a little help with it. And Art said, you'll find some power in these rooms. He says, all you got to do is show up, suit up every day, and come on, go to a meeting. He says, and you don't have to drink anymore. He said something like that to me every day. This went on for 87 days in a row. And he said, well, you're getting pretty close to, he said, making 90 meetings in 90 days. I said, well, I got to go to a funeral. A cousin of mine, just a little bit younger, had passed away in Raleigh. I hadn't talked to him for a while. I was kind of busy. I was not drinking. I got to that man's funeral, and there was a great big bunch of flowers sitting up here, and he had the big book group written on it. I said, Lord, that must be another AA group. And it was, and he was trying to get sober too. But it was a very unfortunate situation. He got involved in some bad things, and he was murdered. And but after the funeral, I went to the family's house, and we were all fairly close. It was a big family like this, and I was dying to ask the question. I finally got to my aunt, and I said, Jean, I said, who is it that's trying to get sober in this family? And she said, well, there's a whole bunch of them trying. And Lee was the deceased. She said, Lee was going to AA meetings. She says, I'm trying to get his daddy to go. I said, okay. Well, I didn't know that. I rode back home that night from Raleigh, and it was kind of late when we got home. I was with my family and all that. And that was the first meeting that I had missed in that 87 days. And I felt a little awkward. And it was after midnight, and I called Art. And he says, "Are you doing all right?" Now this was the days before everybody had a cell phone in their pocket. I said, "Yeah, I'm doing pretty good." He says, "Have you had a drink today?" I said, "No, sir." He says, "Well, good." He says, "You know, you really need a sponsor." And I said, "Okay." Well, they had told me the first couple of days that's what I had to have, was I had to join a group, get a sponsor, and get a big book. So I did that. Well, you're going to hear something from another man up here in a minute. They gave me to Warren. Warren was my sponsor. Well, I didn't really know it at the time, but he hadn't been sober much longer than I had. And he was just as crazy as I was. But I thought he knew everything about staying sober. Warren was a practicing attorney at the time, and he was just as busy as he could be. And unless you was a judge or a senator, you couldn't get in to see him. Then I find out later on, if you was a drunk trying to stay sober, you could slip right in there. He would see you. And I did. I went in, asked him 2 or 3 times. I said, "What do I need to do next?" He said, "You're doing it." It was a very confusing time for me. But I'll have you know, some years passed by, and I did stay sober, and I became friends with some of these folks. Several of them are sitting here in this room today. There was a couple of real cute stories that I did want to tell about Art, but I think I better keep some of them to myself. You see the picture of him up there sitting there with that little dog in his lap, and that dog's name was Jeff. He says, "Jeff won't bite you." Well, he always barking and just cutting up bad every time I came up. Well, he never did really bite me, but a little bit later on, Jody and Art moved in this apartment. And she had a little dog. I think the dog's name was Joey. That dog never shut up. Jeff would be calm, and then Joey would stir him up. Well, he'd come over one day to greet me, and he bit me right on the leg. And I had on a pair of khaki pants like I did today. Now, Art says, "Now, he didn't hurt you, did he?" I said, "No, I'm all right." Well, he had, talk about breaking the skin. He broke the skin and the blood was coming through my pants. I said, no, I'm all right. He says, "He won't hurt you." So he's just as friendly as he'll get to be, particularly after he gets to know you. Say, "Well, now this is a couple of years later and the dog bit me." I was sitting there, and Jody went on about her business doing something, and we were talking, and first one thing to another. He says, "Let's take this dog out, let him go run across that field." And when I stood up, I kind of did like that. He says, "What's that on your leg?" I said, "It's blood." He says, "Have you hurt yourself?" I said, "Yeah, I must have cut myself on the way in here." He says, "I know Jeff didn't bite you." I pulled up my pants leg. That was 3 big marks across there like that. He says, "You know Jeff didn't do that." I said, "I know. I must have hit that little sign Jody had out in front of the yard on the way in here." Folks, he was serious. He was sure that Jeff had not bit me. It was probably 2 or 3 weeks later before Art really looked at me one day. He said, "Did Jeff really bit you that day?" I said, yeah, he did. He says, well, you're the first one. I think there's Carl sitting there, and he bit him. I think there's Paul over there, and I think it might have bit Paul. I think all that happened before I got bit. They've been around a little while. So Art would tell you something once in a while that, well, I'm not quite sure that's true. And Art told me one day, we were having a real serious conversation. They had, my sponsor, Art, and all them had suggested that I do certain things and not do certain things. He never did say, well, I told you so. But that was an understood thing. I've already told you so, don't do that. And Art says, you like to go fishing, don't you? I said, yeah. I said, as long as we don't take Jeff. He said, well, I don't usually take him out there. So we ended up going fishing, and we went fishing a lot. I watched him try to back a boat down the ramp one day to unload the boat. I said, Art, you need a little help with that? He said, yeah, I used to be really good at this. He said, but yeah, help me a little bit. Well, that was the worst thing I could have seen. Because from then on, I had to drive every vehicle that we was in. And every time we got in the boat, I had to back the boat down there. Now, I would back it down there and take care of it and everything, but I never did it right. You got it too far in the water. Or he tried to load it up. He said, you're not far enough down here. And one day, by and by, he says, you know, I think you do right good back in that boat. I said, well, the only reason is because Jeff ain't here. And he told me one day, he says, you're not going to turn that loose, are you? I said, I'm just picking on you. He said, well, I'm tired of it. Now, he honestly said that. He says, Jeff, he said, you must be the first one that's ever bit. He was obsessed with that. And that's why I picked on him so bad about it. I kept saying, you know, that dog, I said, you need to do something about that bad dog. He didn't really like that. But through my life, after knowing Art, I had an opportunity to do a lot of things with that man. I worked for him some, and I think several of you in here might have done that. And we'd get out in the field. He'd give you one of them sticks, had a prism on top of it, and once in a while, you were going to be so far away, he'd give you a walkie-talkie. And he'd send you right on. He said, I want you to try to walk a straight line. He says, and we'll talk as you're going. He says, if you see any bushes there, cut them down. Here, he gave me a bush axe. I got up to the edge of the woods there. He said, you go a little bit to your left. And I did, and I kept going over there. He says, that's it right there. I said, well, I can't see you. He said, well, cut the bushes out the way. Well, that was my first experience on cutting line. And I had to cut bushes. About a half a mile. I got confused in the middle of it. I said, am I supposed to hold this stick up while I'm cutting these bushes? It really don't matter. Just get them cut. I got way on down there one day, and there was a great big snake. I backed up a little bit, and I called him back on the radio. I says, there's some snakes down here. He says, they'll not bother you. All I could think about was Jeff. He was not Not a little snake either. I said, I said, any kind of way that you can stop your line right here, and then we can pick up from here later on? No. So I didn't know what to do. How am I going to get around this snake? So I threw a stick at him and all this, trying to run. Eventually he run off. I got down a little further, and there was some big old trees there. He called me back on the radio, and he says, "You've gone far enough. Stop, turn around, and let me see that prison." Well, you had to adjust it up and down and all this, and I did. Then I heard dogs barking. And here come, looked like 5 or 6 dogs, and they had not been taken care of. You could tell they'd been living in the woods. It's what I would call a wild dog. I said, "Art, there's some dogs down here." He says, "They'll be all right, they'll not bother you." Well, if you've heard anything about what I've said here, the theme of this is everything I ever said to Art. He said, "Don't worry about that, that'll not bother you." I cleaned up part of this because usually what he would say, "That won't bother you. As long as you don't take a drink, you're going to be all right." He said that so many times that apparently I began to believe it. And the day finally came, he says, "I think you need to sponsor somebody." I said, "Okay." I went to the Beach Group that night. They were meeting in a little church now that's been torn down. When I left that meeting that night, I had 3 people. We called them pigeons back in those days. I had 3 pigeons. The first one he gave me was a gay man. The second one was a black man. The third one they gave me was a young lady. I said, "What do you expect me to do with this mix of people?" He says, "Keep them sober." I said, "How am I going to do that?" I said, "I can't hardly keep myself sober." He says, "You'll figure out a way. Just tell them what I've been telling you." Well, they stayed sober for a while. One of them, as a matter of fact, has been sober over 30 years. I was tickled to death. I talk to him every once in a while. One of them's deceased now. He drank himself to death. The other one decided she'd take off, and I ain't never seen her since. A little while, there's a little point to this. A little bit later on, Art says, "You got 100% record." I said, "What you mean?" I says, "Everybody you've worked with in Alcoholics Anonymous has stayed sober." And they hadn't. They had gone off and got drunk. I said, Art, what are you thinking about? He says, "The point is you didn't get drunk." That was probably the second most powerful lesson that I learned right there. It didn't make any difference to anything else that I did. As long as I didn't take a drink over, I was going to be all right. Folks, that same story that I just told you, I've told over and over and over. Everybody I've ever worked with in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not a very complicated program. If you don't take that first drink, which is a secret we got around Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you. Every once in a while I'll hear it said at a meeting, "If you just don't take that first drink, you won't get drunk." The first time I ever heard that came from a child. My son was 7 years old. He looked at me, he says, "Daddy, you know, if you don't take that first drink, you won't get drunk." I wanted to slap him. What do you know about it? I was the same young'un that his mother would send him out the back door when I came in the front door getting the liquor from up under the seats of my car. I didn't know it, but just as soon as I got out of the living room, she would take the bottles that he got and go pour them down the sink. Now, I bought a lot of liquor like that they poured out. Just before I got sober, unbeknownst to me, my wife joined Al-Anon. And she joined a group which was known as the Black Belt Al-Anons. Warren's wife was in charge of this stuff. Her attitude completely changed. I would come home nights, I had had a drink. I'd sit down. Now, you got to understand, there was no way this woman was going to offer me a drink. I had burnt all those bridges. After she joined Al-Anon, she says, honey, would you like another drink? I thought this was pretty good, and this went on for a few weeks, and then I find out this woman's trying to kill me. She would not stop pouring the liquor. If my glass got just a little bit low, she'd pour another drink. You need any more ice? I told Art about it shortly after we met and everything. I said, I think that woman's really trying to kill me. He says, but he'd always come up with something. He'd say, well, how long has it been since you haven't had a drink? I said, well, it's been a few days now, and I tell him, he says, well, that's good. He says, you going to do a meeting tomorrow night? He'd always bring it back to that. I don't care what we did, or when it was. It was either, how would this affect you about not drinking? And then I found out it was all about love. Art loved me. He loved me sober. We didn't always agree on everything. We did agree on the not drinking part, but it took some time to do that. Art was one of the most extraordinary men I have ever met in my life. He was involved in all kinds of things, and he had worked really hard in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he set an example for us. You'll hear something from a couple of my friends when they come up here and share what they share. But it's been one of the most extraordinary things that I've ever experienced in my life. Because when I first met him, the most powerful thing in my life was alcohol. It was stronger than the love of my church, the love of my family, the love of my children. Alcohol came first. That's the most powerful thing I ever experienced in my life until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And whatever the power was they introduced to me, took the desire to not drink away. That's really important. It don't always happen exactly the same way for everybody. And some folks don't call on God. Some folks say higher power. Some folks say Jesus. It doesn't really make any difference to me what you want to call it. I'm just so glad that I met Art. He changed my life. I'm probably not the only one in this room whose life was changed because they knew Art Denny. He was my friend. We fussed, we argued, we went to meetings, we had all these meetings after the meetings. We've done everything that fellowship done, and nobody was ever on the same page about anything. That was part of the beauty of it. But what we did was we all got together and tried our best not to drink together. And it changed me. I hope you guys can appreciate what that man has done for me and what I've witnessed him do all these years. The thought he left me with the last time that I spoke to him was, do you think we could do something a little bit different at our next meeting? And this was after we had argued a little bit. I said, yeah, I think we can do that. He says, okay. And somewhere in that conversation was the last thing I ever said to her. I didn't see him like when he passed away. And that night that Jody called me, and told me he passed away, it was a very lonely night. I live alone. And I couldn't go back to sleep. And I thought about it quite a bit. And it was a day or two later, Jody called me back. She says, we're planning a service. Would you participate in it? I said, I'd be glad to. And she said, well, you try to be nice. I knew what she meant. Have I done all right? I cleaned it up, and I want to thank everybody for allowing me to say the things I did about all of you. Have a few minutes here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Mike?
Afternoon, folks. I'm Mike, and I too am a recovering alcoholic. I had sort of laid things out for the way I had hoped that most of you would get some feel for, but then Rodney has taken it all away, and that's normally the way it works in this program. It really does. But so, you know, I felt that in coming here today, I was here to help celebrate the life and times of Art Denny. And that brought to mind several what I thought were important things. You know, as Rodney said, early on in sobriety, Art would put you to work or whatever the case was. For some unknown reason, I didn't have a driver's license. And so Art would come and pick me up, and went over to, in fact, that particular time, Jody was with him, and he had a farm to survey. I believe it was down by Swansboro. Somewhere in the Swansboro neck of the woods. And so he starts pulling his survey instruments out of the back, and I'm in the building business, so I had a feel for what was going on, but I did notice that the earth that we were standing on by the road was probably about 5 feet higher than the area that I thought that I was going to be in. As it turned out, it was Jody and I that were going to be in that property. And so I could tell that Jody wasn't too excited about it, neither was I, but when I made up my mind early on that if he said do something, I was going to do it, didn't matter what it was. So we walked down, and the corn then, I don't know whether it's the years that have gone by or whatever the case may be, but it seems so, the stalks seem so big around and so much taller than they are today. And I live out in a farming community. And so Jody and I had got down to the end of a road, and she said, if I'm not mistaken, again, this has been over 20 years ago, Mike, why don't you walk in first, because you're taller than I am. So obviously I did that, and although I was listening to see if Jody was close in back of me, and so we got down to a certain point, and I mean, it was so thick you couldn't tell the color of your shoes. And Art, Jody said, Art, you know, I'm not sure we're not going to step on a snake out here. And as he told Rodney, a snake's not going to bother you, Jody. You know, just make a little noise and don't worry about it. She said, well, it wasn't, there's no point in you worrying about it because you're up there on the road. Well, and I couldn't have disagreed more, but that was kind of the Art Banning that I came to know over many years after that. Art, the first time I met him, and I had known him through the surveying business before I knew him through the what I'm going to call the fraternity business. And he didn't seem to be that friendly a person when I first knew him. But as time went on and I got to know him, and then as years went on, I began to realize what a truly fine gentleman he was. In all the years that I was around him, I never heard he and Jody say one word that was unacceptable in any church. And you know, I was there most of the days in his closing days, and you know, Jody, you know, I could tell she was tremendously concerned, as was I, but I felt like I knew what was coming. It was just a question of time. And during that period, I began to think back over the things that we had done over the years. A lot of good things, and I would co-sponsor people with him. And then later, as Rodney said, he would, you know, put me out sponsoring others and that sort of thing. And he truly knew how the system worked. And he put every fiber of his being in seeing that people not only got sober, but remained sober. And I too, as he told Rodney, I had 100% success rate in sobriety, and I couldn't understand that because some of the folks that I had sponsored had gone back out, and I asked him about that, and he said, well, you've co-sponsored and sponsored about 30 or 40 people, and you haven't gotten drunk yet. So that's the way he measured my success rate. And so it was Art had a way of Rodney said that he and Art would argue back and forth. I don't believe they ever argued. I think they had differences of opinion because they were probably two of a kind. But Art and I never argued, and anything he said do again, I did it, and I'm so thankful for it today, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to have been Art Denny. Some of the humor that came from knowing Art was he had been telling me he was thinking about buying a boat, and I had lived on the beach all of my life until a couple of years ago, and my dad and I would build boats in a boathouse down on the shore in Pino Shores. I think we had the only boathouse because we put it up before the city incorporated. But anyway, and I'd buy boats that were drug boats that had been seized. I had a cousin that lived down south, and he could call me and tell me about them, and then I'd go get them, bring them up here and sell them. But so, you know, over a period of time, I had a good knowledge of building on marketing, on whatever the case may be. Big, small, it really didn't make any difference. Well, Art was telling me about this Boston whaler he was going to buy. And the first thing that came to me, knowing Art, was how much horsepower does it have on it? And I don't know whether Rich still has that boat or not, and I don't remember how much it was, but it looked like a lot of horsepower to me for that particular boat. And I assumed that boat would go close to 40 miles an hour. And I also knew that if it would go 40 miles an hour, Art was going to run at 40 miles an hour. And so one day he and Jody had been out fishing out by the Coast Guard station and ended up riding in through the Beaufort waterfront, and I don't remember whether it was Jody that didn't want to go back through the inlet or whether it was Art, but nevertheless he decided to go the long way around, which today would be under the new bridge that we probably all came across today. And when he went under it, he went just as fast as that boat would go. And as Rodney spoke of Jeff, there's never been a truer word spoken. Jeff got after my ankles as well. But it was a calm afternoon, a calm Thursday afternoon, and all of a sudden the boat ran out of water. And I wasn't there. I don't know whether it ran into 2 inches of water or 3 inches of water, but it ran enough that it came to a sudden stop. And which meant that Jody had to go, and Jeff had to go. Well, that night at the meeting, I heard about them getting thrown out of the boat, but I didn't hear anything about Art getting thrown out. And then later, you know, he fessed up and he got thrown out too. And he had a difficult time getting Jeff back in that boat. But Art he's just been he's been an added star in my life, and I'm here today because of Art Denny. And so in closing, I would just say, well done, thou good and faithful servant.
sure am glad that, by the way, my name's Warren Davis. I sure am glad that Mike mentioned not once but twice the celebration of life. And with celebration often comes laughter and joy. And that's why I brought this briefcase. In this briefcase is the yellow pad. And if there was any one thing that Art and Tom, his best friend, Tom Davis, who happened to be my sponsor, gave me the devil about it, it was having to carry around, I'll put quotes around, I use a darn yellow pad. Their contention was that a darn lawyer couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't do anything unless he had a darn yellow pad in his hand. Well, that wasn't far from wrong, so I thought I would sneak this yellow pad in here, and maybe they wouldn't come across it until it was too late. And it's too late. Before I proceed further, I'd like to get a little formal. Alcoholics Anonymous, as we all know, is an anonymous organization. If there's any folks here from the press or from the news, we would request that you do not put the name of anyone present here as associated with Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I truly appreciate that. Now, in addition to carrying this yellow pad around, you all will be glad to know that there's only 2 pages. Boy, I can rip through it if I have to. And we got 2 pages on Art Denny, who I dearly love. Art died at the age of 87, as we know, on October 22nd of this year. He was a Korean veteran, and then he attended NC State and became a licensed professional surveyor. He was one of the most prolific surveyors and developers in Carter County. As a matter of fact, he developed 4 subdivisions for me, and 2 of them I didn't even know he was doing at the time. But that's okay. His real passion, and that's what I'm here to talk about, his real passion was helping other people, such as myself, survive. An active alcoholic is surviving. That's the highest level he can reach. And Art had a special way in attaching himself, not physically, but attaching himself to a suffering alcoholic. He was a very, 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 I gotta use very 3 times, active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't think of a single job in our group, and I was a member of that group, still am, for almost 40 years. Not a single thing that he did not do. Of particular importance to me, because it applied to me, was Art was never too busy to answer the phone, no matter how late at night it was. And he'd speak to the suffering alcoholic, and it was often that was just the first step, just the very first step, because he would meet him normally at a place, something was open in Carter County, and he would stay with him and work with him through the next day until he got him to a safe place, or a place where he would not be hurt or injured. I've known him, I'm gonna tell a little joke on him, I've known him to stay, to go to lock himself with a drunk or two in a motel room and stay with him all night. I know this because one night he locked me in the hotel room with the drunk. And I got to stay all night, and that was an experience. That was a humbling experience, and an experience that made me honor art even the more. My sponsor, as I think Rodney mentioned, my sponsor was Tom. And Tom and Art individually were explosive, and together it was dynamite. If those two guys ganged up on you, you sure did. Rodney, you did a good, colorful job of that. Art was always ready to take care of my loose ends, no matter how crazy I got. When Tom left, he traveled a lot. So he turned, two reasons he would turn me over to Art. One, he was traveling, and two, he said, go talk to Art about those spiritual things. He knows more than I do. And he'd send me over to Art, and we talked about the spiritual things of the program. And Alcoholics Anonymous is a spiritual program. Those of us whose lives have been saved, and I'm one of them, believe fervently that Alcoholics Anonymous is a spiritual program, without question. From my perspective, he was always kind. I don't want to read this because I don't want to mess this part up. From my perspective, he was always kind and gentle and thoughtful, and he was never too busy to spend time with me or other suffering alcoholics. Tom said that the golden rule was the principle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I used to always ask, what are the principles? What are the principles of the program? And finally, Tom told me the principles of the program are the golden rule. If you live the golden rule and treat other people the way you wish to be treated, you will not drink again. And I found that to be the case. In conclusion, I think I made my 5-minute limit off. I can't say anything more serious and more from the heart than what I'm going to say right now. In conclusion, Art D, we call him Art D, was a kind, loving person who dedicated his life to helping those persons less fortunate than himself, who were suffering from the incurable disease of alcoholism. He was a wonderful man, a gentle man, a caring man, and a loving man. Now I'll sneak this back to my seat. There we go.
When I in awesome wonder consider all the world the hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, how great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, how great thou art, how great thou art. When through the woods and forest glades I wander and hear the birds singing sweetly in the trees. When I look down from lofty mountains grandeur and hear the brook and feel the gentle breeze, then sings my soul, my Savior God, how great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, how great thou art, how great thou art. And when I think that God his Son not sparing, he bled and died, took away my sins. And when I think that God his Son not sparing, he bled and died to take away my sins. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, how great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, how great thou art, how great thou art. When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart. Then I shall bow in humble adoration and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, how great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, how great thou art, how great thou art.
Mr. McCabe, I want to say I've grown up in a Baptist church all my life. For those of y'all who know me, especially my family, you know I'm a little bit older than I used to be, but I want to tell you, I've heard both of those hymns all my life, and I don't know if I've ever heard a more beautiful rendition of both of them. I know Uncle Art would be very happy that you sung that. My Uncle Art, boy, a lot of people three gentlemen have already said all that I could say about Alcoholics Anonymous and what it meant to him. He was a man with big dreams, and I think that was really part of the Denning family legacy, because we all have dreams, and we all try to make those dreams come true. While we're here today to reflect on his life and what it meant, I believe that last day that Billy and I went to see him, that he knew his days were numbered, and he was getting ready to go home to be with the Lord and be back with his family. But he didn't have a doubt in his mind that he was indeed going to be with the Lord, and he indeed was going to be back with his family. His family was big to him. He grew up in a big family, in today's standards especially. He grew up in a family that didn't have much money. But what they lacked in money, they had in love. And he shared that with his family so much. And anybody that knew him, especially his family, just couldn't be around him much without him sharing that. And with that said, I'm going to read something that I don't know if how many of y'all had the opportunity to read this book that he wrote, not many pages, but a lot of good things in there. But he wrote this, and I just want to say this one paragraph. It said, "Today, all of my immediate family has passed away with the exception of my brother, Carsey, and myself." Carsey was my father, for those of y'all who don't know. "My brother and I share many good memories about our family, and we cherish those things passed on to us by each of them. I know a few families that have such love and respect within the family unit as ours. My brothers and myself both served in the Korean and World War II wars and fought for those values. Carsey and I still exchange our political views on leaders in our own way, but keep our values alive and well. About 2,000 years ago, the Apostle Paul wrote, 'Practice these three things, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love.' Uncle Art Pat really practiced that very well. We've all talked about Alcoholics Anonymous, but he also helped those with drug addiction. I know that because I know how much he helped my sister in her ongoing battle with prescription meds. He helped her at a worse time. And it's just part of his life. We all know that any time he was called to help in any way, that he would go. He made it a point to share what he learned through his hard and difficult times with others to help them get through those times. Of course, he always had the ability to have a witty comeback for almost any conversation, and that's already been documented well today. And in some cases, he instigated that, especially with talking to some of his nieces. But more than anything, he had a special love for his closest family members. Pat, Vicki, I know you're not here, but I know you're listening. Rich, Jody, he loved y'all very, very much. Jody, his love for you was so deep, and everybody that knew him knew that. And he always knew you were there for him, thick and thin, that you were there. Vicki, you were the daughter that was a twinkle in his eye. And any time that he ever thought of you or talked about you, you brought a smile to him that only a beautiful, loving daughter could do. And Rich, you were the son that made him so proud to call you, or to be your father. Your love of the Lord and willingness to share that with all those you come in contact with made him even prouder. And just like myself and my father, he especially loved the times that you two were able to work together. He said he shared that with me quite often. The last several years of my dad's life, he and Uncle Art would have at least one phone call a day where they would just check in, share stories with each other. Some of those stories they shared hundreds of times. And I feel confident that since they've been together probably about a week now, that they're already sharing some of those same stories again. Since my father passed, Uncle Art would share things with me about his time with my father and his brothers, some that I never knew. He shared one thing with me that I'm so thankful for. My name is Carsey, the letter K, and then Denning Jr. And my dad's obviously was Carsey K, Denning Sr. It was not originally that. It was originally Carsey Kai, K-I-E, Denning. Dad didn't like that, so when he registered for the draft, he also had his name changed to Carsey K. So, but we talked about love, and he shared with me how he, Uncle Hyson, his brother, and his parents, his mom and dad, mom and papa, and how my mom and one of my mom's brothers all piled into I believe it was a 38 Plymouth, and they drove from Coates, North Carolina, to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and how that was the first time they'd most of them had ever seen the mountains, or Blue Ridge Mountains. And he said before they got through the mountains, they didn't care about seeing any more of those mountains. But they also broke an axle going around those. But he said thanks to a man they met and one of my uncles, they were able to get that axle changed, and they finally did make it to Kentucky to see my dad prior to him being shipped off to Germany, or excuse me, to England to fight in World War II. My uncle always made his nephews and nieces feel loved. When Billy and I went to see him just a few days, like I said before he passed away, I was the first one to walk into the room, and when I walked into the room, he said, and he told the nurses we're in there, and he told the nurses, he said, now that is my favorite nephew. And I felt really good, because I used to be 6 foot tall, and now I'm 5 feet 8. I'm actually shrinking, but he made me feel tall again. But then he saw Billy walk into the room, who was another nephew, and he said, oh, what I meant to say was that both Billy and Kay are both of my favorite nephews. And I'm sure if Jordan or CT or any one of them had walked in, he'd have probably come up with a way to save that one as well too. He was something. When Billy and I went in that day, we stayed with him for a couple hours, and I don't believe he stopped talking any time during that time, from the time we got there to the time we finished. And any time a nurse would walk into the room, he'd ask, he says, are you pretty? And they, of course, would all say, well, of course I'm pretty, or at least that's what you told me yesterday. Well, he always had a special place in his heart for Jody, Vicky, and Rich, and Teresa, and the grandkids. He also loved his nephews and nieces. And while Billy and I were there, we did a FaceTime call with Joy Dan. Of course, she inherited some of that Denning humor, which I obviously didn't. But to which they both exchanged lines during that FaceTime call. And he was, of course, telling her how beautiful he was, and she was telling him how beautiful she was. And at the end of that, they both finished the call by telling each other, "I love you," which is another thing that he was known for. And I know that call meant a great deal to my Uncle Ward, but I also know it meant even more to Joy Dan. As for Billy and me, I know that those last hours that we spent with him, there's nowhere in the world that we could have been that day, than being there with him, and it meant so much to us. So, Uncle Ward, look up, because I know that's where you are. Just like my mom and dad, I'm going to miss you, and I look forward to seeing you again.
I promised that I asked everybody to share 5 minutes. But I also knew when I asked that was impossible. Thank you, everybody, for being here today once again. Thank you for those taking part in the service. Wish that I could have more people share. I want to share just a few things, and I want to direct this primarily to my immediate family, Jody, to my stepbrother Tim, and to my wife. I can't see because of that flower arrangement. To my children. It was in 1976, I believe it was. I couldn't wait to get off the Trailways bus and be with my dad. Over the phone, he had said that he had a place for us in Atlantic Beach, and if I wanted to be with him, that would be possible. So we made that happen, and it was in a mobile home, a single-wide mobile home, and coastal mobile home park at the end of Atlantic Beach going into Pownell Shores. I'm not going to talk like they did. I'll make it brief. I didn't want to start in 1976 and go up to today. I know some of you are worried about that. Thank goodness the rest of them aren't preachers. I'll be here a little bit longer. But TV dinners never tasted so good when they came out of the oven with my daddy's hand giving them to me. Walks on the beach never felt so good during that summer. The first summer I was here, picking up horseshoe crabs. I didn't even know what a horseshoe crab was, but the beach was loaded with them that year. Sand dollars. Jungle Land had just been built right next to where we were living. And I thought it was amazing that my daddy would let me go there anytime I wanted to. And I was just 12 years old. I thought, wow, he's just letting me go and be there. Come to find out that I think that he was dating during the time that I was at Jungle Land. Nothing for him to worry about, because I later found out that a police officer that was Jody's stepson was there, a security guard. Howard was there. I don't know if he was looking after me or not, but those were precious times. And it was precious. It was a precious day. On May 5th, 1977, when Dad and Jody got married. He entered into my life with not only a wonderful stepmother, but the Overman clan. And for many, many years, we shared a lot of good times. It always seemed to be around food. Daddy and Jody would throw a 4th of July party every year. And oh, what wonderful times it was. I won't go into all of that, but I just want to thank the Overmans, especially Tim, for what y'all have meant to me. And to my wife, thank you for putting up with me this last week. I love you so much. And oh, didn't my daddy love you. When I proposed to Teresa, just after I asked her to marry me and she said yes, my daddy almost tackled her. A bear hug. They almost both ended up on the floor. He was so excited that the Lord had placed Teresa in my life. And Jessica. Just the last time that we were with him, he called Jessica and wanted her to know how special she was to him. And Joshua. Of course, I got all kinds of children. But they were there. Joshua, I see my dad and Joshua a lot. They are a lot alike in many ways. Will and Jonathan and Hope and Daniel. A lot of love. My daddy liked to eat. He liked to eat. Me and him shared many meals. I could talk about land surveying and how we just were all over Carteret County and just land surveying. What a tremendous thing. But he loved to go eat lunch together. And whenever that happened, you can count on two things happening. He would flirt with the waitresses. No doubt. Leaving them a big tip. Just so next time he came, they would recognize who he was. He was a big tipper. The second thing is no matter what he was wearing, what he ate for lunch was going out with him on his shirt. He was not the neatest person. This video that we're about to see has 3 songs in it that he picked. The 2 songs that we had earlier by my friend Julius, my dad's friend Julius, who's a realtor, good friend. He picked those songs out. 3 things. In fact, I want to narrow it down to 3 things because I am a preacher. 3 things that my dad really instilled in me is, and not necessarily that they come in order, but he stressed the importance of having a good work ethic. A good work ethic. And that, I think, stems from coming from good stock, the W.A. and Ida Mae Denning family. Good stock. A strong work ethic. Second of all, the importance of worship. Yes, he was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but he was also a Christian. We enjoyed some great times worshiping together. One of the greatest times I can remember when he was so excited about a church that was having a revival, and he wanted me to go and be in that revival service with him. And so we went to God's City of Refuge. Oh man, what a powerful time of revival in the services. And it was there that I saw my dad truly worship the Lord. Didn't see that in the AA rooms. He loved Jesus. He instilled into me the importance of knowing the Lord, knowing where you're going when it's all said and done. Third of all, he instilled in me the importance of witness, being a good witness. And I think my friends from Alcoholics Anonymous have really shared about how my dad's witness continues. He's not here. But oh my goodness, isn't he here? He lives on in our hearts, in our minds. One of the songs in this video tribute, the song he wanted it, I know he wanted it. He didn't talk about the service so much, but the last time that we were together, he talked about things that were in hindsight, that he knew it was coming. And with him having oxygen in his nose, and 60% of his oxygen was coming from those tubes, he wanted us to know that song. He said, "Do you know that song?" And I said, "I'm not sure, Daddy." He said, "Well, let me sing it for you." So with 60% of oxygen being supplied to him, he sang, "I'll be seeing you." Oh, my friends, he would say, "I'll be seeing you." Thank y'all again for being here. Thank you for being here for my family. And for my sister Vicki. Some of you don't know, some of you might. And she's in a nursing home. She's had a stroke, a heart attack. She's a cancer survivor. She's a survivor. I love my sister. I'll be seeing you.
I want to tell you one more thing that Art told us, and he told us often. He said, if you ever see a turtle on a fence post, he said, just remember he didn't get there by himself. Those who will, please stand. Pray the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
Those of you that are able, please remain standing for the rendering of military honors. Folks, on behalf of the entire Denning family, thank you for being here today and participating in the service. Please continue to remember them in your thoughts and prayers over the coming weeks. If you would, just stay where you are. I'm going to escort the family to the back here, and they'll continue to fellowship after the service then, okay?
Hey, sweetie, how are you?
I'm here.
Me too.
How you doing?
Sick a lot.
No.
Sick a lot.
I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places. At this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. I see you in that small cafe, the park across the way, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is through,
I never made a fortune, probably too late now. Oh, but I don't worry about that much, 'cause I'm happy anyhow. As I go along life's journey, I'm reaping better than I sowed. I'm drinking from my saucer, 'cause my cup has overflowed. Ain't got a lot of riches, sometimes the going's rough, but I've got a friend in Jesus, and that makes me rich enough. I thank God for all His blessings on me, and the mercy that He's bestowed. I'm drinking from my saucer, 'cause my cup has overflowed. Oh, sure, I've been through some storms, and yes, I'm sure there were times when my faith must have got a little bit. But you know what it seemed like? One day, all at once, those dark clouds broke, and that old sun, she started shining again. So Lord, help me not to grumble and complain about the tough roads I have told. Oh, I'm drinking from my sauce, 'cause my cup has overflowed. And if I should go on living, if the way gets steep and rough,